What actually replaces God in an atheist's mind? Not as a slogan, not as an insult, but psychologically, because God does not only answer, who created the universe? God also answers deeper questions. Who decides right and wrong? Who gives life meaning? Who sees your suffering? Who forgives you? Who protects you from death? So when an atheist says, I don't believe in God, the real question is not just what they reject. It is what steps in afterward. For some, it is reason. For some, morality. For some, human connection. For some, nothing at first. For some, something quietly takes God's place without them noticing. That is where this gets interesting. Because the mind does not stay empty for long. Something always moves into the center. And the first thing that often replaces God is not science. It is responsibility. God was never just one thing. When people ask what replaces God in an atheist's mind, they often imagine God as one object sitting inside the brain. Like a chair in a room. Remove the chair, and now there is an empty space. Simple, right? But that is not how belief usually works. For many believers, God is not one chair. God is the whole furniture store. God is comfort when life becomes too heavy. God is authority when choices feel confusing. God is the parent above all parents. God is the judge who sees what people hide. God is the witness who notices every tear, every sacrifice, every silent act of kindness. God is also meaning. God is the answer when a child asks why grandma died, and every adult in the room suddenly becomes very interested in the carpet. So when someone stops believing, they are not removing one idea. They are removing an entire inner system. That is why the question is not just, do atheists believe the universe has a creator? The deeper question is, what happens to all the emotional jobs God used to do? Because God may have been the place where guilt went, the place where fear went, the place where hope went, the place where grief went, the place where a person whispered things they could not say to anyone else. If that disappears, the mind has to reorganize itself, and that is not a small task. That is not moving a lamp from one table to another. Al-5, that is rewiring the whole house while still living inside it. This is why some atheists sound calm on the outside but carry a private earthquake inside. From the outside, it may look like they simply changed their opinion, but inside, something much deeper may be happening. They are not only asking what is true, they are asking what will hold them now, because God was not just an explanation of the universe. God was a relationship, a structure, a safety net, UMP5, and sometimes a prison. When that disappears, the first replacement is usually not science, it is responsibility. And that sounds noble until you realize how heavy it is. Responsibility replaces obedience. In many religions, morality begins with obedience. Do this because God commands it. Avoid that because God forbids it. Be good because heaven is watching. For many people, that structure feels safe. It works like guardrails on a mountain road. You may not love the guardrails, but when the road gets narrow, you are glad they are there. Then atheism removes the guardrails and says something uncomfortable. Those guardrails were built by humans. Now drive carefully. And that is where many people misunderstand atheism. They think losing God means losing morality, but often, what disappears is not morality itself. What disappears is the idea that morality can be handed down fully finished. Like a rule book from the sky, that changes everything. E5 obedience lets a person outsource the final answer. Responsibility does not. The atheist has to ask harder questions. Does this reduce harm? Now 5. Does this increase honesty? Does this respect another conscious being? What kind of person am I becoming when no one rewards me for being decent? That last question matters, because morality based only on reward and punishment is not maturity. It is spiritual parking enforcement. Do the right thing, or someone writes you a ticket. But if the only reason a person does not steal, lie, or hurt people is because God might punish them, then the problem is not atheism. The problem is that their morality is still wearing training wheels. And to be fair, everyone starts with training wheels. Children need rules before they understand principles. Do not touch the stove comes before a lecture about heat, nerves, and skin damage. Otherwise the lesson arrives with screaming, 5, and possibly a frozen bag of peas. Religion often gives people moral training wheels. The real question is what happens when those wheels come off. Some people wobble, some crash, some discover balance. This is why many atheists insist they can be moral without God. They are not saying morality is simple. They are saying morality does not disappear when supernatural surveillance disappears. Many people now see morality less as divine obedience, and more as human responsibility. That sounds freeing, but freedom has a nasty little habit. It hands you the steering wheel, then refuses to tell you where to go. So after obedience fades, the next question arrives. If God no longer gives life a purpose, what does? Meaning replaces destiny. Religion gives people a story. You are born, you are tested, you suffer, you obey, you die, and then the truth is revealed. It may be frightening, but it is clear. And clarity is comforting. Even bad news feels less terrifying when it comes with a map. Atheism often removes that map. There is no divine plan, no cosmic script, no hidden author, making sure every tragedy becomes beautiful by the final chapter. For some people, that feels unbearable. Because if there is no plan, suffering can feel random. A child gets sick. A good person dies young. A cruel person lives to 97 and still complains that the soup is too hot. Where is the justice? Where is the meaning? Religion often answers, God knows. Atheism usually cannot say that. Atheism says, maybe no one knows. That can sound bleak at first, but it also changes the task. Meaning is no longer discovered like buried treasure. Meaning is made, not made in a fake way, made in the way a home is made, slowly, repeatedly. Through care, memory, effort, and love. No one says a house is meaningless because humans built it. No one looks at a birthday cake and says, well, unless this cake descended from heaven, it has no value. That would ruin the party. And depending on the family, it might get you moved to the small table with the children and the suspicious potato salad. Human-made meaning can still be real. A promise is human-made, a marriage is human-made, a song is human-made, a funeral speech is human-made. Yet these things can carry enormous weight because they gather human attention around something fragile and say, this matters. So the atheist often replaces destiny with chosen meaning. Not, I was placed here for a purpose, but, I will choose what deserves my limited time. That word limited changes everything. If life is eternal, this world can become a waiting room, a test, a hallway before the real destination. But if this life is the only life, ordinary things become strangely sacred. A cup of coffee with a friend, a child laughing in the next room, a walk in the evening, a dog looking at you like you have just been elected mayor of the universe. These things are no longer warm-up acts before eternity. They are the show, and that can create tenderness. But it can also create panic, because, if meaning is chosen, it can also be chosen badly. So when God no longer defines the purpose of life, the self starts searching for a new mirror. Identity replaces belonging. Religion does not only tell people what is true, it tells them who they are. You are saved, chosen, fallen, forgiven, a child of God, a servant, a sinner, a soldier, in a cosmic war. These identities can be heavy, but they are powerful because they locate a person inside a story. That is one reason religion can feel so secure. It gives you a name, a tribe, a language, a calendar, a set of enemies, and a set of songs. It tells you where you came from, what your pain means, what your body is for, and what will happen when you die. That is not a small thing. That is an entire psychological address. So when atheism removes that structure, the person may not only ask, what do I believe now? They may ask something more frightening. Who am I now? Because losing belief can mean losing more than a doctrine. It can mean losing Sunday mornings, family approval, community, marriage stability, and the ability to sit at a holiday dinner without feeling like an undercover detective in your own family. And human beings are not built to float alone. We are social animals. Even introverts need belonging. Yes, even the man who says he does not need people but has a detailed emotional relationship with his lawnmower and a very strong opinion about how strangers park at the grocery store. So what replaces religious belonging? Often, identity. The atheist may become the rational one, the skeptic, the freethinker, the one who escaped. At first, this can be healthy. When someone has spent years feeling trapped, a new identity can feel like oxygen. It helps them stand upright again. It gives them language for what happened. But there is a danger. Identity can harden. The atheist can become just as tribal as the believer they criticize. Same emotional machinery, different bumper sticker. Instead of saying we have the truth because God gave it to us, it becomes we have the truth because we are smarter than them. That is not liberation. That is religion without incense. The human mind does not only want truth, it wants status, it wants belonging, it wants a team jersey. So some people leave religion and enter another absolute system. Political ideology, online tribes, celebrity worship, wellness movements, conspiracy thinking, Even science can be misused this way. Not science as a method, but science as a costume for certainty. Real science says, here is the evidence, and here is how we might be wrong. Bad science worship says, I am correct because I used a graph. And we all know a graph can make nonsense look respectable if the lines are confident enough. So, the deeper question is not whether someone believes in God. The deeper question is whether they still need an infallible tribe. Because if they do, they will find one. They may call it reason, freedom, politics, or truth. But if it cannot be questioned, it will behave like church. This is where atheism becomes psychologically interesting. The mind can reject God and still search for something God-shaped. Truth replaces comfort. For many atheists, the central replacement for God is truth. Not comfort, not tradition, not belonging. Truth. That can sound cold at first, almost like someone traded a warm home for a laboratory chair, but the emotional reality is usually much more painful than that. Many people do not stop believing because they want life to be meaningless. They stop because they cannot keep pretending. A doctrine stops making sense. A prayer goes unanswered. A scripture begins to look morally disturbing. A religious leader behaves badly, and somehow the institution gets more protection than the victim. A child asks one simple question, 5, and the adults react like the Wi-Fi just went down during tax season. That is often when the machinery becomes visible. The pressure not to ask too much, the fear of doubt, the careful language used to make contradictions sound holy. The way mystery sometimes means, please stop noticing the problem. And once a person sees that, belief can become impossible. Not because they hate God, not because they want chaos, but because they cannot force their mind to kneel. That is a lonely place. Comfort is powerful. Comfort says, stay. Everyone you love is here. Truth says, look again. Comfort says, this belief held you when you were scared. Truth says, but 5, is it real? Comfort says, do you really want to risk your whole life over a question? Truth answers, you already are. This is why many atheists experience doubt as moral courage. Not rebellion, not arrogance, courage. They are choosing intellectual honesty over emotional safety. A believer may disagree with their conclusion, and that is fair. But the inner experience still matters. Many atheists did not leave because they wanted to sin. That accusation is popular because it is easy. It turns a difficult intellectual and emotional process into a cartoon. He just wants to party. Really? Years of prayer, guilt, family tension, EO5 fear, grief and social loss just so someone can sleep in on Sunday and buy coffee without feeling watched. Come on. People are more complicated than that. Sometimes atheism begins because truth becomes more sacred than comfort. And here is the strange part. That is almost a religious impulse. The willingness to suffer for truth. The refusal to worship what you believe is false. The desire to live honestly, even when honesty costs you. That is not spiritual laziness. It is spiritual seriousness without supernatural belief. 5. But truth has a limit. Truth can correct an error, but it cannot hold your hand. Truth can expose a false comfort, but it does not automatically replace the comfort it destroyed. It does not sit beside a hospital bed. It does not promise a grieving mother that her child is safe in heaven. So the atheist mind needs another replacement, not for facts, for pain. Acceptance replaces prayer. Prayer is one of the most intimate parts of religion. Not public prayer, not the polished kind with long words, and a voice that suddenly becomes 3 inches deeper. Private prayer, the prayer whispered in bed. In 5, the prayer in a hospital corridor, the prayer before bad news, the prayer that says, please, I cannot carry this. For many believers, prayer is not mainly theology. It is attachment, it is reaching, it is the nervous system looking for a hand in the dark. That is why losing prayer can feel so personal. You are not only losing a belief, you are losing a place to put fear. So what replaces that in an atheist's mind? Often, acceptance. But not the weak kind. Not everything is fine, everything is not fine. People get sick, people betray each other, bodies age, time steals things. Knees begin making sounds like old wooden stairs. And suddenly standing up from a chair becomes a full weather event. Acceptance means something harder. It means facing reality without bargaining with the sky. The atheist may still talk inwardly. They may still breathe deeply. They may still write thoughts down. They may still sit in silence. But the direction changes. Instead of asking the universe to change the outcome, they try to change their relationship to the outcome. That is not always comforting. Sometimes prayer gives helplessness somewhere to go. Without prayer, helplessness has no obvious address. So it has to be carried, processed, and slowly transformed. Through grief, through friendship. A5, through therapy, through action, through time, through the simple, stubborn decision to keep making breakfast. That may sound small. But sometimes making breakfast is an act of defiance. When life has knocked you flat, toast is philosophy. The butter is optional. A5 but strongly recommended. Atheists often replace prayer with practices that do some of the same emotional work. Reflection, meditation, conversation, journaling, nature, music, service. Not because these things are magic, because humans need rituals. A person can reject religion and still need ritual. That is not hypocrisy. That is biology wearing a black sweater. We are rhythm-making creatures. We mark birthdays, we light candles, we keep old photographs, we visit graves, we speak to people who cannot answer anymore. Even atheists do this. Because disbelief does not cancel love. It only changes what we think love can reach. And here the question becomes sharper. If there is no God to receive the prayer, no divine ear listening in the dark, who witnesses the pain? The answer may be the most important replacement of all. Human beings replace divine witness. One of the deepest functions of God is witness. God sees the hidden injustice. God sees the private sacrifice. God sees the tears no one else noticed. That matters because one of the worst parts of suffering is not pain. It is unseen pain. A person can endure a lot if someone says, I know, I saw, it mattered. Religion offers the ultimate witness. Nothing is forgotten. No wound is invisible. No act of kindness disappears into silence. Atheism threatens that comfort. If there is no divine witness, then some things may never be seen. Some crimes may never be punished. Some sacrifices may never be honored. Some lives may vanish without a cosmic record. That is a brutal thought, and atheists should not pretend it is easy. But here is where atheism becomes ethically demanding. If no divine witness exists, then human witness becomes more urgent. We have to see each other. We have to remember. We have to build justice while people are still alive to need it. We cannot say, God will handle it later, and then walk past suffering now. That is the atheist moral pressure. No backup court, no final appeal, no heavenly accountant balancing the books after closing time, which means human action matters more, not less. If someone is lonely, visit them. If someone is grieving, sit with them. If someone is abused, protect them. If someone is forgotten, say their name. No angels are coming to do your shift. Harsh, but also motivating. It removes the excuse of cosmic outsourcing. The atheist does not say, everything will be made right in the end. The atheist says, then we should make more things right before the end. That is not despair. That is responsibility with its sleeves rolled up. And let's be honest. Some people are much better at loving an invisible God than helping a visible neighbor. The visible neighbor is inconvenient. He talks too much. He borrows tools and returns them in mysterious condition. The invisible God never blocks your driveway. But real compassion happens in the visible world. And this question cuts both ways. Does your worldview make you more present to suffering, or does it help you explain suffering away? Believers can hide behind God. Atheists can hide behind cynicism. And cynicism is just despair trying to sound intelligent. So what keeps the atheist from becoming cold? Sometimes the answer is awe. A replaces worship. People often assume atheism drains the world of wonder. No God, no miracle, no sacred mystery. Just atoms bumping around like confused shoppers in a supermarket aisle. But for many atheists, the opposite happens. The world becomes more astonishing when it is no longer treated as a temporary stage set for another world. The stars are not decorations. They are ancient fire. The body is not a clay puppet. It is a living history of evolution. The mind is not a ghost trapped inside meat. Although to be fair, some mornings it feels exactly like that. The mind is matter becoming aware of itself. That is strange enough. No angels required. Awe does not vanish when God vanishes. It changes address. It moves into nature, music, mathematics, birth, death. And the fact that consciousness exists at all. Think about that. For billions of years the universe had no eyes. Then, somehow, it grew eyes through us. That is not a sermon. That is reality. And reality is already weird enough to make your hat sit crooked. The atheist may not worship the universe, but they may feel reverence toward it. A quiet reverence. Not kneeling. Not praying. Just standing there and realizing, I am temporary, but I am here. That can be enough. Not always. But sometimes the religious person may say, A points to God. The atheist may say, A points to existence. But both are responding to the same human shock. The shock that anything exists at all. And here is the twist. Worship often involves surrender. Awe also involves surrender. but not surrender to a ruler. Surrender to scale, to mystery, to not being the center. In that sense, atheism does not always inflate the ego. Sometimes it shrinks it. You are not the chosen centerpiece of creation. You are one brief animal on one small planet orbiting one ordinary star. That could humiliate you, or it could liberate you. Because if you are not the center of the universe, you can stop acting like customer services is personally betraying you when the printer jams. OE gives the atheist humility without worship. But awe is delicate. It does not automatically tell you how to live. So the final replacement must be something more practical. Something that can survive Monday morning. The future replaces heaven. Heaven is powerful because it repairs the greatest wound in human life. Loss. The dead return. The faithful are rewarded. The broken are restored. Every goodbye becomes temporary. No philosophy can compete with that emotionally. Let's be honest about it. Atheism has no replacement for heaven that feels the same. Not really. Memory is not reunion. Legacy is not resurrection. Influence is not a hug. Anyone who says otherwise is selling emotional discount furniture. It may stand up, but do not lean too hard. So what replaces heaven? 5. For many atheists, the future, not their own eternal future, but the future of others, children, students, friends, society, the planet. The people who will live after us. This shifts the emotional center. The question becomes less, where will I go after I die? And more, what will remain because I lived? That is a different kind of hope. Smaller than heaven, yes, but not meaningless. A tree planted by an old person is an argument against despair. They may never sit in its shade, but someone will, and that matters. There is a quiet dignity in caring for a world you will not personally own forever. Don't Krentz understand this. Teachers understand this. Anyone who has fixed something in a house right before selling it understands this too, although usually with more muttering and a suspicious receipt from the hardware store. The atheist future is not guaranteed paradise. It is fragile. It can fail. That is what makes it morally serious. Heaven says, the ending is secured. Atheism says the ending depends, in part, 5 on us. That can create anxiety, but it can also create urgency. Care now, repair now, love now, tell the truth now, forgive now. And, when forgiveness is deserved, apologize now, before pride turns into a family heirloom everyone keeps passing down but nobody wants. Because there may not be another realm where unfinished conversations get neatly filed and resolved. This life may be the only table where we all sit together. And some people are waiting for a divine banquet, while ignoring the person across from them. The atheist says, this table matters. That is the replacement, not heaven above, responsibility forward. But now we reach the uncomfortable ending. E5. Because not every replacement is wise. When God disappears, something always tries to sit on the throne. And the question is not whether atheists worship. The question is what they might worship without noticing. The throne never stays empty. Here is the part both sides need to hear. The human mind does not like emptiness. Remove God, and the throne rarely stays empty. Something climbs up there. Reason, science, politics, pleasure, career, romance, nation, family, self-expression, personal freedom. Even trauma can become a god if it organizes your whole life and demands daily offerings. That is why atheism does not automatically make someone free. A person can reject religion and still become ruled by something absolute. They may no longer kneel in a church, but they may kneel before being right, being admired, being independent, being untouchable, or being smarter than everyone at the dinner table. And let's be honest, some people do not want truth. They want a microphone and no fact checker. But this cuts both ways. The believer may worship God in name while actually worshiping certainty, control, tradition, or winning arguments with relatives who are only trying to pass the potatoes. Everyone has a highest value. Everyone has something they protect. Everyone has something they defend when it feels threatened. That thing may not be called God, but it can function like one. So what replaces God in an atheist's mind? Not one thing, many things. Responsibility replaces obedience. Chosen meaning replaces destiny. Human witness replaces divine witness. Acceptance replaces prayer. Awe replaces worship. The future replaces heaven. And sometimes, unfortunately, ideology replaces church so smoothly, you barely notice the hymn book changed. That is why this question should not be used as an insult. It should be used as a mirror. The real question is not, how can atheists live without God? Many do. The deeper question is, what is organizing your mind right now? What tells you what matters? What comforts you when life becomes cruel? What gives you permission to judge others? What do you refuse to question? What would you defend even if it made you dishonest? That is your functional God, even if you call it something else. And this is where atheists and believers meet, not in agreement, but in vulnerability. Both are trying to survive consciousness. Both are trying to live with death. Both are trying to love people they cannot keep. If God disappears from a person's mind, the mind does not become empty. It becomes exposed. And what replaces God reveals what that person truly trusts. For some, it is truth. For some, compassion. For some, pride. For some, tribe. For some, wonder. For some, nothing yet. They are still standing in the ruins, waiting for the dust to settle. The frightening truth is that atheism does not answer every human need, but neither does belief, if belief is used to avoid growing up. In the end, the question is not only what replaces God. The question is whether the replacement makes you more honest, more awake, more compassionate, and more responsible for the brief life in front of you. Because whatever sits at the center of your mind is what you are becoming. And that may be the most dangerous altar of all. So maybe the question was never really, what replaces God in an atheist's mind? Maybe the better question is, what replaces God in any human mind when certainty breaks? Because everyone, believer or atheist, builds life around something. A truth, a hope, a wound, a fear, a person, a promise, a story they cannot afford to lose. And when that center is shaken, we find out what we really trust. For the atheist, God may be gone, but the need for meaning remains, the need for goodness remains. The need to be seen, forgiven, loved, affive and remembered remains. That is why atheism is not simply an empty room. It is a room where the old furniture has been removed. And now every object must be chosen carefully. Some choose truth, some choose compassion, some choose pride, some choose bitterness. Some choose wonder. And maybe that is the real test. Not whether you have a God, but whether what sits at the center of your life makes you more honest, more awake, and less cruel. Because in the end, every mind has an altar. The only question is what you are placing on it.